All right, we're in. Just like that, we're in. Welcome to PartnerOps Partner. I'm your host, Aaron Howerton. With me this week is my good friend, partner in crime, Literal Scratch co-host. I'm going to plug it this week, Jessie Shipman. Jessie,
Oh,
hi. Thanks for
hey,
coming today.
Aaron.
Oh, hey. You didn't
Oh,
see me
hey.
there. That was like a very Mr. Rogers style hello. Oh, hey. How you
Oh,
doing there,
hey.
kid? I do love
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers.
I never watched Mr. Rogers, but my kids did watch Daniel Tiger, which gave me a good sense of uh,
Yeah.
the whole ecosystem around Mr. Rogers. And quite frankly, like, what a perfect man. He was so
Right? In
great.
so many ways. Daniel
Yeah.
Tiger is one of our favorites. Bluey is one of our favorites. I'm convinced, though, that Bluey is not made for kids, it's made for adults. I think we've talked about this.
I think it's a subtlety thing. I think it's like it's made for kids, but the themes are intended to help us overcome some of our childhood trauma.
And it's all about like, hey, here's how, like, every episode kind of starts with like the dad kind of behaving like I do, like, hey guys, love you, kind of annoyed. And then like throughout the episode, the kids are just kids. And he finally just like eases into like, fine, I guess we're gonna play. Like that's what I like about it. Like it's the kids are just kids, and it's the parents that are constantly teaching me. Anyways, I love the show. This is exactly why people come to my podcast, by the
Yeah,
way.
I bet it is.
Um, just like Literal Scratch, just to get caught up on like what kid shows do our favorite people in the ecosystem love. Jessie, I brought you on for a couple of reasons. One, you're an easy guest for me as I still trying to ramp this up. So just for everybody who listens, I'm totally hijacking a regular talk point with Jessie around her company, but it's also applies. The other reason though is that you are a tech founder in the partner tech space. And I have
Mm,
known you now for, did you know, almost 2 years? I was thinking about that this morning.
it's not longer than
Do you
that.
realize that? No, it's not.
Okay, feels longer than that. Not in a bad way.
I'm
It just
sorry.
feels
I
like
do that to people. Yeah, no, I do that to people
yeah.
for sure.
No, yeah. I
But
guess
yeah, like, so we met at
2020. Are
what?
you sure?
Supernode. We met before,
Okay,
and
it'll
then
be.
Supernode.
It's almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in May.
No, can't be.
No.
2 years in May. Promise.
All
We
right.
can debate this any
I
other
believe
time.
you. That
Basically,
seems
though,
right.
yeah, I feel like I've known you since the very earliest days of your company. Not like you were still when I knew you, you were still working full time. You were
Yeah.
side hustling this sucker. We met
Yeah.
via LinkedIn, and then we also like I got really excited about what you were doing very very quickly, which I think was a good connection point for us because you were explaining this to people. Um, when you think about that, like when we met and how excited I got, I think you remember that. I think that build connect for us. Was that the kind of reaction, like as a tech founder who's selling a new idea, did you get that kind of reaction often from people? Or was that kind of an anomaly for you?
Um, I think it was hard um to gauge people's genuine reactions because I didn't really approach it from like, "Hey, want to buy my thing?" And so it
Yeah.
it ended up being more just like,
I like that face,
um,
by the way.
what's that?
Hey, you want to buy a thing? I
"Hey, you
just
want
like
to
the
buy
face
my
you made
thing?" I
too.
always think about like,
Good voice.
I feel like I should maybe go to a conference or two with like a trench coat on and just like on some blank CDs, like write Fluincy, like people used to sell sell software from a disc and just be like, "You want to buy some software?" I feel like a lot of people would
That would
laugh
be
at
so
that, and I
fantastic.
might get into some interesting conversations.
You
Um,
would. And then on the disc, you put your favorite, like it's your favorite playlist.
yeah,
So
that
there's
would
like
be
real
fun.
content on the disc.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking
Yeah.
about it
Anyways,
just being a straight costume and there being absolutely nothing on the disc, but I do love this idea.
a domain across the front and a whole bunch of tracks. If they ever put it in, they'll get surprised with a whole bunch of tracks.
A
Anyways,
mixtape. Anyway,
back to the question.
whoa, yeah, we went down the wrong uh
That's
rabbit
what we
hole. Okay,
do.
so yeah, your question for me
Yeah.
was was that
Was
genuine
my
or like yeah,
reaction.
it was your
Yeah.
reaction what I
Yeah.
normally got. Um I think when I approach people and ask them like, what's the biggest problem or one of the biggest problems that you have in managing partnerships. That's kind of how I tried to approach that like first marketing research that I was
Hmm.
going after. Enablement was always in the top 3, but Nobody could tell me what exactly about enablement was hard, right? So, like, when I first started this, I
That
don't
was
think
gonna be
you
my
even
next
know this.
question.
When I first started this, like, I really thought that it was a content issue. I thought the problem was not being able to create content that people wanted to read or engage with. And so I was actually thinking about developing like a learning management system for partnerships in particular. That was like the very
I do
first
remember that.
thing that Fluency could have been. But then
Yeah.
as I
Also,
started,
level set for anyone who doesn't know, your company is Fluency.
oh yeah,
Let's just define what it is. I know I'm
Fluency
taking it for
helps
granted.
uncover,
Like,
yeah, Fluency helps uncover partner referrals from everyday conversations. So if you're a tech
and where
company,
do they go to learn about this, or like what's the domain?
yeah, it's get fluency, Fluincy.com. And also
Okay.
you can just hit me up on LinkedIn if you're fluency curious. Um,
Yeah, and I'll have links, by the way, in the show notes to both the
Perf,
website and to Jessie's LinkedIn bio. She's again really responsive through the LinkedIn. She's on there a lot, so
all the
you want to
time.
give her a
Yep.
follow from there. Okay, now that we've done that, it's cursor
Yeah.
what it is. I
So
do
the
remember this
problem,
conversation because you answered that problem for me, right? Like enablement. And if I remember right, like the very first iteration was, hey, we're gonna monitor information, and when partners show up in a conversation, we're gonna surface enablement content to your sales rep so they understand the value of that partnership in light of conversations they've just had. Like that was
yeah,
iteration maybe one or two, I remember, right? And
that
that got
was
me
like
excited because I was
1.2.
facing that
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my current role, it was a thing like we were using Crossbeam in particular, right? And it's
Yeah.
nice that you bring up the enable, you bring up this list, but people still didn't know, well, who's the
What to
partner
do.
and what do
Right.
I learn about the partner, right? And so I loved that approach, but that's not where we've landed, right? So keep going on your journey
No,
there.
yeah, and
Apologize.
actually, like, that wasn't even actually the first thing, right? So the first thing was I was gonna build this, like,
Yeah.
mobile first LMS for partner teams, where,
Hmm.
people would do, like, micro learning instead of one-pagers. Um,
Hmm.
but as I started digging into it and doing a little bit more research, like, people were like, "Nah, like, the one-pagers are sufficient. Like, all I need is somebody to just know enough to do the next thing. I don't need them to be experts. I don't need my
Yeah.
partners to be experts in my software or in my solution. All I need them to do is know enough to involve me." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, interesting. Okay, so like, well, and do it when it matters to a customer." And that was the thing was like, okay, now we're sort of honing in on what is just in time or like what's just the right time. And that's when you and I think met was when it was sort of evolving into this just in time partner enablement
Yeah. I think
based
I stole
on
that idea from you because I love that. I mean, I come from product development. I've read the Toyota way, right? Just in time, JIT, like the whole thing, manufacturing, and
yeah,
bringing that concept of just in time enablement, just in time learning. I picked that phrase up from you. I think when we met, and have used it consistently since then because I think that that reflects the best kind of enablement. I never like to sit down and get, oh, let me do a 3 hour training on sales process. No, I need to go try to do sales and I need the enablement to show up in the
yeah,
system. And that's a different design. It requires different tech. So I do remember picking that up from you. One of the first of many things I've learned. And I think that is when I entered the conversation. And I got it because I was struggling with that problem there. So I think we connected on that. As you kept going, though, did you find people resonated with that idea
yeah.
quickly? That they
I
got
think
it?
that they
Yeah.
did. I think that people resonated with the concept of like they resonated with the concept of something just in time, but it still
Hmm.
wasn't necessarily like it surfaced the question, what is the right time? Right? So like just in time
Yeah.
meant different things to different people. And also partner tech is it's a tough space to try to sell things in. I'm
Well,
sure
talk
that you
about that. What makes it hard
yeah,
to sell partner tech?
I'm sure that every time you do one of these that it's the same probably the same thing that every partner tech founder is saying right now is essentially like, well, if I sell into partnerships only and it's a partner tech tool for partner teams, like there's not really a budget for that. It's getting a little better,
Hmm.
but there's just not really a budget for that. And
Yeah.
also partnerships by design are a long tail ROI. And
Hmm.
nobody is buying, or nobody was, it's getting better, like I said, but nobody was buying software that doesn't have like a very clear path to payback or path to ROI. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's one of those like, okay, if somebody gets because the first iteration of Fluincy was essentially like it existed on Crossbeam's API, right? So it
Hmm.
didn't
Yep.
work unless it could access the overlaps on Crossbeam's API. Um,
Which
and
again, I remember I just want to highlight this too. You had used Crossbeam, you'd seen Crossbeam, and I think part of your drive for this was recognizing that gap, like in their feature set. Ideally, because when we
yeah,
first talked, my thought was like, I feel like this is stuff Crossbeam should do.
that's right.
Hey,
Yeah,
we've identified some overlaps. It's tied to your account. Here's an email where you work. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know that we'll ever get rid of email as a functional system for people to
no,
use. And that's what drove it. And I was like, I remember talking, being like, well, that's a feature Crossbeam should have. I'm very adamant about that, and I think that's an interesting space to start to develop ideas in. One of the things I learned from you on that too is like, oh, that's a viable way to build a product, and it's iterated my own thinking around software development. That I do think, as software continues to eat the world, a lot of the products and platforms and things that I see are more like feature gap products. They're coming
yeah,
in to fill a gap. Integration partners are growing, right?
for sure.
But back to your point, I just want to highlight that because if you haven't seen that trend, I'd love to know what my few listeners think about on that. But back to your point of you're facing sales challenges, you're working in a partner groups, but it's a limited buyer power, limited audience.
Yeah, for sure. And also,
Yeah.
it was built on a paid feature of a highly freemium product. Like most
Yeah.
people who use Crossbeam, most organizations that use Crossbeam use the free version of Crossbeam because you got, I don't know if it's still like this, but you got a lot for free. And
Yeah.
um it wasn't super necessary
Agreed.
to be buying it, right? But the only
Yeah.
way to access or to like connect something to it through its API was to purchase it. And so that's actually where I ran into just a ton of roadblocks. It wasn't so much that people were like, that's not really a problem. It was more just like, well, the problem is that I can't buy you and Crossbeam at the same time, right? So it was a
Yeah.
go to
And I'm not
market
buying
problem
Crossbeam.
for me, um, more than it was more than it was like a, you're not actually solving a problem. But then the other piece on top of that was like, okay, so we're enabling, right? Like we're solving this sort of like just
Yeah.
in time enablement problem, but like how does that enablement problem then translate into dollars? So somebody
Ding
learned
ding ding
about the
ding ding.
partner, but like what happened after
Yeah.
that? And it was a
Attribution.
very loose like, well, I mean, we're sort of solving for partner attribution, right? Because we're able to say that,
Hmm.
hey, this rep was then able received this message and then was able to, and then pulled in the partner through and then
Yep.
attributing that through some other system like Salesforce. Or and there was a lot of talk about like, well, does it integrate with Salesforce, and like could we just like
Hmm.
toggle something in Salesforce on every time somebody got one of these messages as part of like a partner attribution. And uh and so ultimately it just wasn't working. I wasn't
Yeah.
really able to like find anybody who could, like, there were plenty of people who were like, I like that and I want to try it. But who were then stuck with like, I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay for both. Um,
And that's one of the things I remember you telling me at some point last year. This one of the other epiphanies you had when we chatted one day. You said, "I finally realized that if they won't pay for Crossbeam, they won't pay for me." And you
yep.
were, because of that approach, you were kind of stuck behind that buyer barrier.
Yeah.
But you, in true tech founder fashion, being real scrappy,
Yeah.
um, taking your approach right, you took the feedback. And this is one of the things I think that I really admire about your approach and all the work that we've done through this and talking about Fluincy and why I just hassled you about it all the time, because I've been excited for your success and it's been fun to watch you iterate. But you go back to the like ask why. I think that Simon Sinek, whoever wrote that book, right? Like start with
Let's start
why.
with why. Yeah.
Um, I, Yeah, I think that's ingrained in you. I don't know if you've read that book or not, but I could see that when you talk to customers, you're like, "Well, tell me more about that problem. Help me understand more clearly kind of what you're doing." And I think that comes from your enablement background. You're a teacher,
For sure.
right? Your natural instinct is to help people be successful, and to do that, you intuitively know that you have to listen first and get that information. I think that's been really valuable to you as a founder. Um, what do you think
Yeah.
on that? I mean, because you got to, I could cover your background. I think they could do that in other podcasts. I think too. I think you've talked about that extensively. So, we'll skip and jump over that. But do you feel like that's been a valuable background for you as a
Oh,
tech
without
founder,
a
coming
doubt.
from
Yeah.
teaching and education? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I think. I've met lots of other founders, and I'm not sure that have met too many other founders who have an education background or started as a teacher. I'm sure they're out there. They probably
Hmm.
built ed tech companies. um, but the idea around listening first, solving problems, cause and consequence, like all those kinds of things really come from not just a teaching background, but specifically like history and social studies, where that's such a
Hmm.
huge theme. Um, but yeah, I think every experience that I've had, because before I was a teacher, I was an athletic trainer, um, and some people are like, well, that was a waste, right? Like, what a wasted degree. And I'm like, no, like I use the skills that I learned about noticing people, noticing, um, you can sit on the sidelines of a football game or a soccer game and watch the players and when they get injured, watching the mechanics of those injuries, and then being able to deduce like what happened to that person, how long it might take them to come back, all of the steps from actually looking at and evaluating an injury, to the initial treatment and first aid of that injury,
Hmm.
all the way back through, to rehab and then back onto the field and the support after, like all of those. It's a system,
I'm
right?
so
Like all of them
sorry.
are systems.
You hear the ringing? Let me mute myself.
I don't hear a ringing.
You couldn't hear my, so I'll a quick interlude. My work gives me a work number through Zoom. I have never needed a work office phone number in, I don't think, like in the past 10 years at least, of work. Every 6 months or so, some person somewhere in the world uses it to go apply for mortgages. And I get never ending phone calls from all the mortgage leads of the site they fill out. So I'm glad you couldn't hear it. And I'm glad I could explain that, because that was also very important. Please continue. I apologize.
Yeah.
ADHD.
Yeah, no worries. So like, I don't know. I guess I was just saying like all of my previous roles and the zigzag that I took from athletic training into
Yeah.
teaching and then into IT and then into sales and then into partnerships. Every piece of it is just like one layer on top of another, and I use all
Yeah.
of them day in and day out. So,
Everything
um,
you just talked about with athletic training, right? I don't think I realized you had done that. I don't know if we've gone deep on that, because we've talked more about like your education path.
yeah,
Everything you just talked about is like incremental change to get better performance. Like, hey, let's try this. Cool. So you're used to like, okay,
yeah,
well, let's try this. Okay, let's pivot. And the other thing that I want to call out about your experience that I think makes you, I think this goes into your values as a company. And I want to talk about that, like your approach to investment, your approach to partnerships, how do you plan a group, things like that. Um, all of those things to me, Jesse, they highlight you as a person who basically has spent your entire career looking at other people, trying to figure out how to make them successful. I think athletic training is all about making sure the athlete achieves top performance, and you're doing what you can. You're giving them, you're saying hard things to them, right? You're telling them, hey, you got to bench, you got to wait. You're okay having people do difficult things to be successful, but it's always that, the teaching, I think enablement with what you did at Apple, and even the product you built right now. It's all about, hey, how do I help you company? How do I help you person? And in all of our conversations, I just think you're driven deeply by that desire to be useful to your community and the people around you. And I think that's reflected in the values of your company. So let's pivot real quick, because I had Rob on a few weeks ago. And one of the things I tried to highlight about Rob was I like Rob's tech, but I also really like Rob. And when I look at the tech landscape, like there's lots of features, there's lots of platforms. We talk about this often with partners. It's people right now, it's relational. And that's becoming a more important driver for me. So I really like you. Ergo, I want your tech to be successful. And I also happen to like your tech. How does those values influence how you're building your company?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to be a like partner tech, right? Because partnerships is just so much about
Hmm.
relationships. But I don't know. I think that um, this is a problem. The problem that I'm trying to solve is a problem that my community feels in a deep way, right? And so, like,
Hmm.
this enablement piece, for as long as I've been learning about this and in the community and meeting people, enablement has been just such a thorn in the side of partnerships, right? I mean, it's like the
Yeah.
root cause of the 80-20 rule in partnerships is like there's just not enough people and there's too much enablement that needs to be done. And like the larger you scale your partner program, the harder it gets to
Yeah.
properly enable people. And then it gets so hard that you just stop doing it. Um right? Like,
Yeah.
if you get to a certain scale, like you just are sort of like, well, here's some information, and like, and now it's up to you, and you just give up on it
Yeah.
entirely because it's just too hard to scale. And then it becomes an internal problem where you have so many partners, and you have all these people who need to be using the partners, and you have even a marketplace or an ecosystem that's so large that you have no idea what each partner does, and then it sort of becomes it changes from an external problem to an internal problem. And
Yeah.
across the board, from very, very small companies to very, very big companies, like this problem is a problem that is ubiquitous. And
Yeah.
I feel like problems are worth being solved. And like if there are problems, that means that people are struggling with them, and that causes them to not be as successful as they want to be or that they could be. And so I like am deeply committed to seeing that the problem is solved. And if I get to
Yeah.
build a meaningful company around that, while like also um, loving what I do, and maybe hopefully, bringing some people on board someday to also love what they do at a company that loves them back, um, for the work that they do and all of that, um, I would be so fortunate. So I don't know. I just kind of feel like at the root of all of it, like software doesn't exist without people, you know?
I get,
Um,
yeah, I agree.
and
And it's people solving, and I love the focus on problems, right? One of the things I've learned, it took me a long time, I think, to maybe pick up on this and really understand it. But where there's problems, there's revenue, is kind of how I view it, right? There's
totally.
opportunity. If
Yeah.
you can solve a problem for yourself, can you solve that problem now for other people? That's how you can create revenue. In terms of where you're at now, I think your current iteration and what you're doing functionally to achieve that goal of uncovering these partner revenue opportunities, um, I think it's a solid iteration. I feel like you've been with this one. This feels like your direction, right? I think you're seeing success with that. Would you say that's true? Like you feel like
Yeah.
you, after how long has it been? Like almost 2 years of iterating and adjusting and pivoting
Uh-huh.
and like pushing and testing. You finally kind of got into a really solid path in terms of
Yeah, for
product
sure.
fit.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah,
So, I
good
mean,
deal.
it was like, you know, probably like, uh, late 2020, maybe mid 2020, when I was like, maybe this is the $1 million idea, right? Like maybe this is the
Yeah,
thing. Into 2021, and really like, how do I do this? What do I need to do to get
yeah,
started? Like, Googling how to start a software company and like reaching out to a couple of people that I know. Like this is a totally new thing for me. Um,
yeah,
and then really starting to get into um the building of it around like mid 2022. 6 months of building that first iteration that just crashed and burned, the crossbeam integration thing. um
yeah,
and then this has been about a year. This iteration of it um
yeah,
is about a year old, and there's real traction here. I mean, if it was 2020, I would be able to go to I would be able to go to a VC and be like, this is traction. They probably still wouldn't give
Yeah.
me money, but I would at least have a better story than when I was trying to raise money in 2022 and the beginning of 2023. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Where are you at now with that though, right? In terms of, so are you looking for investment? Are you looking for that? Are you focused on customer growth?
I'm not looking for investment. Sometimes if investment finds me, I'm not going to be. I'm not. I don't know. I think I will get to choose, right? So like it depends. There are there are days, many days these days where I'm just like, man, a couple $100,000 would help me to get some projects across the line that are taking like painfully long time right now. Um,
Yeah.
that you have to do when when you beggars can't be choosers, right? Like I have
Yeah.
incredible people who are working with me, but they have full-time jobs, and like I can't ask any more from them other than what
Resource
I'm asking for them.
constraints. Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Yeah.
just like where everybody's like, go shit or go shit, go fast and break shit, right? Like that's the go shit is not the right
Yeah.
thing. I mean, if you need to, you definitely should go, but like, go fast and break things,
Yeah.
is sort of like the mantra of like the lean startup. And the
Yeah.
reality is that like, uh, we're breaking things, but we're just not going very fast. So, it's kind of a very like
Yeah.
a single iteration on a on the product is a 3 month endeavor, which
Yeah.
is just
Yeah.
like a
But that's also
very
based on
painful
like
thing as
that,
a founder.
yeah, the go fast and break things assumes you've got that financial fuel in the tank to run, to
That's
go
right.
fast, right?
Yeah.
Breaking things with product is easy. That's the easiest thing
Yes.
to do when you're building a product is to break things. It's the doing it. It's the speed at which you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just know that I've appreciated being a part of your journey and getting to talk to you about this and getting the inside track, helping you think through your challenges and then seeing kind of where you're breaking through. I can tell you just observationally. One, for me, it's motivational to know you and to see how you're fighting, to get that validation, kind of what you talked about with partner tech. One of the things you and I've talked about, and I think it's important to draw it over and again. I realized this year, even though I write about partner ops and I'm writing into partner leaders, like if I ever want to sell anything in this space, build partner tech, my audience, my buyers, they're not in partnerships,
No, but your
right? Those
champions
buyers
are.
are your,
But the economic buyer is not. Yeah.
yeah, you need the people to get excited about it, but who writes the check? In your experience, who's writing the checks for partner tech? Where's that coming
Well,
from?
the reality is in 2024, it is partner people. Like
Hmm.
if it's the right
Is that
partner
a,
team, it is partner people
yeah?
spending partner money. Yeah.
Is that a change? Because I feel like that's a
It is.
change.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's not don't like not to say that it's not also CROs.
Yeah.
But in organizations where fluency makes the most sense, right? Like it's a scale product. I think there's some people who are using it on a it's
Hmm.
really fun to like see all the people who are like, no, I need that. So there's sort of this
Yeah.
like smaller, more nichey potential customer that's like running an agency and they're small and they're nimble and they just want to like be better at partnerships and they're committed to that.
Yeah.
Um, but the tech company that's buy and those agency people are like whatever, right? There's no buying committee at an agency. They're just like, here's my credit card, right? Which
Let's go.
in some
Yeah.
cases makes them a really great customer. In other cases, it makes them not a great customer. Um,
Yeah.
sometimes, but like because they also are pretty careful about the kind of money they spend.
Yeah.
But at a tech company, where there might be a buyer committee of many, um, if they're scaling, if they've got this agency partner program that they're just trying to scale, but they can't figure out how to be top of mind all the time, that's partner money that's being spent.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like
Okay.
my two like big tech company customers at this point, um,
Hmm.
I didn't have to talk to anybody but the partner person, and they were like, here's the credit card." I was like, "Great, let's go." um,
That's good. I think you're finding that product market fit too, right? And as soon as I
I'd be
get
careful with that
into,
word. I don't know that I've got product market fit, but uh,
that's fair.
trying it
That's
out,
fair.
yeah.
But in terms of like buying approach, right? One of the things that I hadn't even thought about, as I build on the side as well, is when you get to pricing strategy. We talked to Rob about this too, which was
Mm,
really fascinating. Is like there's thresholds, and you need to build your product in a way where you can kind of stay below what the procurement rate are. Like we don't want to have to go through full
yep.
procurement because that's going to definitely slow us down, potentially
Yep.
raise a lot of red flags that aren't there, become problematic. So how high can we go to be a credit card purchase, and can we operate within that threshold as a company? Like that's a real strategic question to ask as you build the product. And I can't say I've ever thought about that until this year because I come from product and I'm just like, I want to build cool stuff. Here's what the cool stuff looks like. It's somebody
Yeah.
else's job to price it. But you
I've
have to
only
figure that out
just
now, right?
Yeah, I've only just recently landed on it. Like I've only
Yeah.
like in the last like 3 weeks or so, like landed on a
Okay.
number that when I tell people, they're like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Great." Right? And also
Feels good on
being
both
able to
sides,
say
right?
yeah, and also just being able to say like, you know, this is how much it costs. And like that's it. That
Yeah.
it's this much money and have them be like, "All right." And the other piece of it too is people really do, even if it's not really PLG, right? It's not, I'm not, I wish that I was at a place where I could do product led growth, but I just don't have like the right technical structures for that right now.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
not product led growth. Um, but it's a simple enough product that it can be, turned on in 15 minutes. Um, but
So glad
I
you went
kind of
there.
have a little bit of like a partner led growth pricing strategy now where I'm like, well, okay, do you want to try it with one or two people? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, great. Okay, it's $30, $30 per user per month. And they're like,
Yep.
okay. And I can literally send them like a Stripe subscription and they put in their
Mm-hmm.
$30, they put in their credit card. And now and then as they build their users, I go in and put in more users and
Yeah.
all of a sudden it keeps growing. And, um, I don't know. Another really cool thing about this is to pivot a little bit from the pricing strategy is
Yeah.
um, so I'm helping my tech customer sort of onboard their partners into it because part
Yep.
of this is, and this maybe is the challenge, but also the great part. So
Mm-hmm.
getting partners to buy into a software that allows their partner essentially to be like present in all of their calls is a little
Mm-hmm.
bit like, you want to do what now? Like you want to have access to what? And like having to explain like very clearly like nobody at the tech company can see any of your calls. All this is helping to remind you when we're a good fit by monitoring the transcripts, right? Like there's no data being
Yeah.
passed back and forth between the companies and like making them very comfortable with this has been part of what I'm doing as an onboarding, which has been a challenge, but also wonderful because every time I introduce this, like literally every time, the conversation I end up getting at is they say, okay, well, this is great for Chili Piper, but what about all the rest of my partners? Um, can this do this for all the rest of my partners? And I'm like, well, it can if you buy it.
100%. I was going to say, you got this natural gateway towards your next
Yeah,
customer. They get to see it work here where somebody else is theoretically paying for their
yeah, not even
engagement,
theoretically, actually. Yeah,
right? Like, so like you get to every new customer possibly adds to your pipeline,
that's right.
which is fantastic, which
It's
is
got
such a
this like
great
built-in
play.
network effect in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's effective, it's one. I also think that to me, it's obvious, right? When we talk about what Fluency does, it's obvious. And I think I'm still wondering, like any listener who doesn't know Fluency, it probably feels a little bit nebulous to you. But at the end of the day, just imagine that you go about your normal day, like the way you would normally go about it. And then every now and then you're going to get a little message in the systems you already use. This is not an external platform. You're not logging in to anything. Is my favorite things about your tech. It doesn't require anybody. Like there's setup. You've already said it. It's fast setup. You can do it guided. You can do it on your own. The real catch is making sure you've got a partner ready to go with you, I think, right?
Yep.
And so you get those things going and then you move on with your life. And occasionally Fluency as a little message pops up and says, hey, you just had this conversation. We think you might want to reach out to this partner. drives action where you're already working. So it's not getting in the way. It's not another sales tool. You're just adding an extra layer of enablement oversight. Hey, where can I help? Right, which I think goes back to everything that you've done up until this point. So if you can imagine that, listener, like, cool, I'm going to keep working. I'm going to work on my Slack, and occasionally I'm going to get a message that says, hey, we just saw you might have a conversation. You might want to reach out to this partner if this is a good fit, and here's how you do it, and everything like that. That's powerful. I think it's real powerful when you see it, and I'm excited about where you're at. This is intended to be a 30-minute podcast, and we're at 34 minutes. I go to like 40 every time because I get real excited, and so far nobody's complained of the 15 to maybe 20 people that actually listen to me consistently.
Hi,
Thank you,
15 or
people.
20 people.
Yeah, Jesse's excited. If you don't listen to us on Little Scratch, by the way, you should, because we also do that, and that's a weekly with our good friend, the Pasher. Is that a good nickname for him? The
I don't
Pasher?
know.
We
You
call
should
him that.
ask him.
No, I'll just do it. Yeah, Jesse, thank you for joining me today. Any last, hey, if you want to get into partner tech, or what do you think's happening with partner tech? Like, any last thoughts you want to leave the operational people with from your side of the things on the tech side?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just nice to know that PRM is no longer your only option. I
Ooh.
think that PRM's been the only option in partner tech for a really long time, except for maybe some like niche channel kind of things like channel scale. But
Mm.
it's worth looking into.
I agree. I will include links to Fluincy in the show notes, people. Please go check that out. You'll get links to LinkedIn. I'll also include them. This will be uploaded to YouTube eventually. I'm not quite as religious about that upload as I am the podcast. But folks, this is what we're going to keep doing. If you have a tech partner that you would like me to visit with, somebody you know that'd be willing to sit down and chat with me about their founder journey, like Jesse has, or their tech experience as a CEO leading partner tech, I'm looking for people. I'm open to it. Thanks for listening. Appreciate you being here. And as always, good luck partnering.